Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Haywood. On behalf of the Huntsville Lake of Bays Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome you to our MP, Scott Aitchison's Business Roundtable. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us and taking time out of your day today. I'll introduce our panelists as, of course, our MP, Scott Aitchison, MPP Norm Miller,
everybody,
Mayor of Huntsville, Karin Terziano, Mayor of Lake of Bays, Terry Glover.
Hello.
We had approximately 190 registrations today, which is wonderful, and I'm glad that people are joining us, and we look forward to getting feedback from all of you for future sessions. Just in terms of the process for today, we did receive a number of questions in advance, which I'll be posing on your behalf to the panelists. If you have a question, though, during this session, please feel free to add it to the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. Alternatively, you can email it to me. If we don't get to your question, I'll make sure that the appropriate person gets your question, and we'll do our best to address it in the next session, which we have not yet announced a date for, but we'll be doing that soon. If you would like to address the panel later on, if we have time, you can raise your hand in this feature, and we'll potentially be able to listen to your comments. But we do have a lot to get through, and we hope to wrap up at about 3:30. So now we're going to hear from each of our panelists with some short opening remarks, and then we'll start with our Q&A. So I'll begin with you, Aitchison.
Okay, thanks, Kelly, and thank you to my colleagues, Norm Miller, for joining us, and of course, Mayor Glover and Mayor Terziano as well. The whole idea behind this was to try to hear as many questions as possible to see if we can answer those questions, and also answer any questions related to changes that you think might need to happen to, in my case, the federal programs that are being offered, and also, of course, to see if there's other ideas that are out there that we should be proposing to the government to help. You know, I've pointed out a few times in a few of our different Zoom meetings like this with my caucus colleagues, about the importance of supporting truly small business and those that are driven in many ways by tourism, and how many of these programs, whether it's the wage subsidy or the loans, don't, you know, a lot of businesses in our area simply wouldn't qualify for them. And so, you know, in those conversations that I've had with many businesses one-on-one, I've been hearing those ideas. We want to hear more of those ideas today, and we may not have all the answers for you, but we promise to get back to you if we do need to dig deeper to find an answer. But more than anything, we want to hear from you and hear your ideas, because it's about, you know, not just surviving the crisis, but surviving the aftermath as well. And I'm looking forward to hearing ideas about, you know, how we get our economy up and running again, and make sure that, you know, we're all thriving. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Norm, I guess, to make a few comments, and we'll get right into the questions after that.
Thanks, and thanks, Scott, for organizing this. It's great. You've got 190 businesses on the line today. You know, as a former business operator, resort operator for 30 years, I certainly recognize there's an awful lot of uncertainty out there, and for a lot of the businesses in Perry Sound, Muskoka, like my former business, you're wondering whether you're going to have a season at all. So certainly I'm really interested in hearing suggestions for how the provincial government can help coming out the other side of this. Certainly, you know, the government's been focused on, obviously, on the health aspects of it and trying to win that front. That certainly has to be the top priority, and I certainly want to help, or I want to thank everyone for doing their part to maintain social distance and hope to help to win the war. We were briefed today by the Chief Medical Officer for Health in Ontario, and in the general public, it sounds like we're making progress. He was talking about the reproductive rate, and if it's less than 1 you're winning, and if it's more than 1 you're losing, and it was at 1.48 and it's down to 1.06 now. So we're close to holding the line in terms of cases especially in the general public. So that's a good sign. I certainly want to thank everybody. And in terms of the provincial government, it's been mainly focused in terms of business on tax deferments. I mean, there's $10 billion in things that are in the provincial purview, WSIB, doubling the EHT exemption, lowering or going to time of use, the lowest time of use hydro rates, deferring education payments so municipalities can defer that part of property taxes. So it's been about sort of trying to affect things that affect businesses' cash flows to make it a little bit easier. But I'll leave it at that because there's a lot of questions, and I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to make points in the question and answer period. So thanks again, Scott, for organizing.
Thank you, Norm.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see such a large group of people, and hope everyone's staying well and staying home. We've been focusing mostly on everybody's health and getting through this, and just now starting to think about the recovery phase and when it might come, and that's one of the reasons that I think we're concentrating more on business now as to how things are affecting you. So my hope today is to really hear what your concerns are today and what you think the concerns will be when we do get the green light to open back up. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Scott, for organizing this, and Norm and Karin and Kelly. Thank you very much. We sure appreciate it. Firstly, I wanted to say that these are unprecedented times, and we in Lake of Bays, I want to commend my staff and council and everybody working together. Certainly the district as well. I want to commend the district and the collaboration that's going on with everyone. So I want to assure everyone out there that we're all working together to resolve a lot of the issues as they come up, and they certainly are coming up fast and furious. I think without belaboring it too long, I just wanted to say that I'm very confident that we'll get through this. We certainly have our hurdles, and I still own a small business, so I'm thrilled to have this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone. And so I'll leave it at that, and I guess we'll open it up to questions. But thank you again.
Okay, thank you. All right, then first question is, does anyone have a plan if this continues all summer?
I'll start with that, and I guess all I can really say is that obviously we're all hoping that the difficult challenge of staying home and trying to flatten the curve will stop that from happening, and there won't be any echo from this. But obviously governments will continue to work together at all levels, the federal, provincial, municipal, and if it does continue longer than we expect or hope, then a lot of these federal programs and supports, many of them will just, I would imagine, be extended. But we're hopeful that it doesn't continue on, through the summer.
And if I may, one of the specific areas I've been tasked with by the Minister of Tourism, Heritage, and Sport and Culture Industries is liaising with all my caucus members and getting specific information on the effect on tourism, on all those that affect the tourism, sport, health, and heritage and culture industries files. So I would encourage people, if they would like to participate in that, because we're going to use that, the minister's going to use that to get a really good detailed information from across the province on how the businesses are being affected. So I would encourage you to send me your email link to norm.miller@pc.ola.org. It's norm.miller@pc.ola.org. And then we will send you a survey with very specific questions.
I guess I would just chime in and echo what Scott said too about the more we do right now about staying home and social distancing, the the sooner we're going to come out of this. And we know that as a tourist community and a community that has so many seasonal businesses, it would be devastating for us not to get back open for the summer. So, you know, what we do today will help to pave the way to be open this summer.
If I could just add, the question had to do with a plan, and one thing I wanted to add to certainly the businesses of Lake of Bays, our economic development coordinator has put together a fantastic program of a number of ideas, innovative and interesting and creative, and we're all going to have to be that way moving forward. So I would direct everyone to our Lake of Bays Township website and certainly the district website for any kind of information needed there. But I'm really thrilled with the plan that we've put together so far. And it's just ideas to get us started, but things you could be doing while we're, you know, waiting to get clearance from health to get open. But certainly we can't tell at this point. We certainly couldn't put a date for it, I don't think, as to when we might open.
And if I may add something else, on a provincial level, the Minister of Finance has been charged with forming a committee to look at all various sectors and plan for coming out of this. So that work is ongoing, and I've been doing conference calls with various sectors in Parry Sound, Muskoka, to get ideas about how we can come out of this, whether it's golf courses, you know, talking about as we win the health battle, then phasing them back in, or marinas being able to deliver boats and that kind of thing. So we are certainly thinking about that.
Good. All right. Our next question, it's a bit lengthy. Do the local levels of government have any ideas to share about tourism restoration support following COVID-19? As an example, Deerhurst Resort is closed and there are hundreds of condo owners who suddenly have no hotel suite rental revenue with limited relief on the horizon. Additionally, many local landlords of long-term rental units, which are in short supply at the best of times, are having difficulty collecting rent right now. Is there a support system planned to ensure that these valuable rental homes are not turned over to banks, leaving Muskoka tenants thereby displaced by sales processes? The District of Muskoka has programs to prevent homelessness, but we may have a very large influx of tenants heading into the existing program, thereby overtaxing it and leaving people homeless. Thanks for your consideration. Scott, do you want to start with that, or do you want to start with Mayor Terziano?
I would let the local folks start with that
Okay.
one.
Okay.
Well, I would say that, you know, as far as Deerhurst goes and getting back on our feet again, it's all about a tourism recovery plan. I know all of our tourism partners are working. Our economic development department, the Chamber of Commerce, and the BIA are currently working on a recovery plan. The MAT board, the Municipal Accommodation Tax Board, has been working on a plan to get people back to our area when the time is right, to boost tourism. Obviously, Muskoka Tourism and Explorer's Edge are all working along the same lines. So, you know, everybody's working in their own little groups right now, and we will end up with a plan that gets the economy going as soon as we get that green light.
And if I could just add a little bit to that, certainly all the area Muskoka district economic development officers are all working together. They're meeting once a week. And to echo what Karin said, there's a lot of collaboration going, and I've got a list here, but the chambers and Muskoka Futures, Muskoka Small Business Center, Parry Sound Muskoka Community Network, Explorer's Edge, Muskoka Tourism, the BIAs, everybody's working together to work on a plan. So the upside of that is, with all that communication, I expect a lot of good ideas to come from that, and it's the only way we can approach this, all working together. So I'm thrilled to say that that's going very well.
And I'll add, from the provincial level, the Minister of Tourism, Lisa McLeod's been very active. She's been holding province-wide telephone conferences with 1,000, 1,500 businesses on each week, but also she's done all the sort of a virtual tour of the whole province. And I was on with her doing one for Parry Sound, Muskoka, getting concerns. And I would again remind people of that survey, which is meant to get factual information about how businesses are affected, so that we can plan supports to help those businesses. So I would certainly encourage businesses to email me. We'll get you the survey.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, what is the latest on small businesses with less than 50,000 in payroll qualifying for the $40,000 small business loan? The CBA, I believe, is what they're referring to.
I can start with that one. The Prime Minister actually announced today that the threshold has been reduced for that loan from 50,000 to 20,000. So they've reduced the threshold for that program, acknowledging that there's probably still lots of businesses out there that still wouldn't qualify for that, but that's what they've specifically done with that program and what they are doing. They haven't actually rolled it out yet.
All right.
And sorry, before I finish, for people that think maybe I'm not paying attention, I'm also answering questions in the chat here a little bit. So I am paying attention and answering questions in a few different spots. So if I'm not staring directly at the camera, it's not because I'm ignoring you.
You're better than I am, Scott. I can't keep up with all those buttons because they're coming up here as well.
All right, the next question. I would like to know more about potential support for rural internet users who are subject to large overage fees.
Sorry, say that again. The large.
Large overage fees. So a lot of people are, their bandwidth and it exceeds
Right.
what they're.
Yeah, so this is actually a huge issue. And it's not, of course, just the overage fees. It's the access to internet and broadband service in general,
Right.
In communities like ours. And it's an issue that I was actually on another Zoom meeting this morning with my colleagues to, talk about how we're going to address this issue. So we've been lobbying certainly the major carriers, Bell and Rogers, to treat rural customers the same way they treat urban customers, where they've waived these overage fees, and we're also lobbying the government to assist with this issue as well, because of course Bell and Rogers don't seem all that keen to play ball with us just yet. But we recognize that it is a huge issue, and we're pushing both the providers and the government to help out.
Does anyone else want to speak to broadband in general? Mayor Glover?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that it's on the forefront of what we're trying to work on here in Lake Basin. It's a huge problem for us, and of course it's a problem for education and everything else. And I know Scott and I had met earlier prior to the COVID crisis on the internet, and I believe it's a major issue for all of us, and we're all working on it as best we can. It's very complicated and has a lot of moving parts, but it certainly speaks to a crisis like this, because I get a lot of calls, people wanting to work from home or can't connect, and it would have been great had we had it up and going now, but we're still working on it as best we can.
Sure, and provincially, it doesn't solve this overage problem, but generally the province is trying to get more broadband accessible across the province. So they've put $300 million towards that over 5 years, I believe it is. In our area recently, there was an announcement in Perry Sound to connect another 250 homes in Carlings Township in December, and I think Seguin Township is expanding it there as well through sort of innovative new technologies. But it's a very slow process and it takes years, so it doesn't solve this immediate situation right now, but it is obviously a long-term plan of the government, provincial government, to expand as much broadband as is possible in our vast geographic area.
Mayor Glover?
If I could just add to that too, Norm, I'd sent you a note because I had met with at a conference in North Bay in the fall with Minister Fideli, and he spoke very highly of course you as well, but he also spoke about the need. So I feel confident that we're all working on this together as well. It's just a matter of getting together on all the points, and it's a difficult problem.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What is the local plan for small business recovery? Does anyone believe that larger retail operators who sell essential goods are gaining an advantage over small businesses by continuing to sell non-essential goods? For example, the grocery stores selling plants when greenhouses and nurseries must remain closed.
I guess I'll venture first on that one, I did a conference call this morning with essential retail businesses, and that was brought up by a couple of the Canadian Tire stores in Muskoka. Concerned that companies like Walmart that are selling food have the whole store open, and they consider that to be a disadvantage and could put them in a long-term disadvantage because they're only allowed to do curbside right now. Though I did make a purchase at Canadian Tire yesterday in Parry Sound, and the curbside worked quite well, actually quite effectively. So it is an issue I've written on their behalf to the ministers and the provincial government responsible for it, just that it's a fairness issue, a level playing field issue.
Anyone else want to address that? Mayor Glover.
Thank you. If I could, I just wanted to add to it. I have a couple of garden centers here, and certainly if we could do anything to level that, it'd be fantastic. I know that I sit on a committee with the district with regards to food and sourcing food and so on, and it has been brought up a couple of times that this might be an excellent time for people to be looking at growing some sustainable food on their own, carrots, potatoes, turnips, the simpler things to grow, give the kids something to do. But it'd be great if we could open that up a bit and allow the garden centers to participate more in that area if they could. That's just my 2 cents on that one.
Well, I'll add to that even if you're classified as a non-essential business, you can still do online sales. So from what I understand, talking to some of the businesses, seed sales have never been higher than the last month. That online sales happen to have a son in the business, and the online sales are selling way more seeds than they ever have. But I guess as lots of people are at home and have some time on their hands, and decide that would be a good way to grow some food.
Okay. All right. The next question, sorry. How do we apply for help for our remaining working employees who've had their hours cut in half? What kind of relief can we get to compensate what we have lost since the week ending March 21st, 2020?
I'm going to actually ask Kirsten Baker to speak to that. It's fairly specific to how those wage subsidy programs work, I think, and Kirsten's on the call.
1 moment. Here she comes.
Wrong Kirsten.
Oh, you're right.
It's Kirsten Baker.
Sorry. Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, Karin. Kirsten, I don't see her. Kirsten. Just a second, sorry. I'm just having a little technical issue here. I don't see her in my, oh, there she is, Kirsten Baker. Kirsten, are you there?
Sorry, wrong one.
There we go.
Okay. I have just been promoted to a panelist. Sorry, now can you repeat the question, Kelly?
Yeah.
Please.
It was, what kind of relief can we get to compensate what they have lost since the week ending March 21st, 2020? We're applying for remaining working employees who've had their hours cut in half.
Okay, so there's been a couple of programs that have been launched in the last couple of days. We're going to put together a document after the end of this call and send it out to all attendees so that they have the eligibility for each and how to apply for them. Obviously, there is the CERB program, Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, that works out to be $500 per week for each applicant, and those can be self-employed people. And now you can make a little bit of money and still collect the CERB benefit. So that's one of the changes that's happened in the last couple of days. The wage subsidy program that's going to be big interest to a lot of our businesses We don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet because it's just been announced and they're still working on all the details. So Scott's on technical calls regularly to provide the opinions of the businesses here to have that input.
Okay, does anyone, Scott, did you want to add to that, or you good? Okay. Thank you very much, Kirsten. The next question, what do you feel the impact of COVID-19 will have on the current real estate market in Muskoka Parry Sound area?
I'll start there since I'm also, I guess technically in real estate. Obviously, I think it's going to slow the market in the short term. I mean, obviously, I think there's not a lot of real estate trade going on right now, and most of the agencies I've spoken with, the brokerages, have followed the guidelines of OREA, the Ontario Real Estate Association, to how they practice their business. But of course, it's been very quiet. My sense, and it's a guess, but my sense is that the demand for people that want to get out of the cities and get into places like our communities, I think that demand is going to grow fairly rapidly in light of all of this. I think certainly in Huntsville, we've seen a lot of growth related to people getting out of the cities, retiring maybe a little bit earlier than they had intended because they're able to sell their house for whatever they're able to sell it for. And then they're moving up here. And I think that demand is going to grow. You just think about the thousands, literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people in that city, Toronto specifically, that are stuck in their 800 square foot condo and can't really go anywhere. I guarantee a lot of those people are going to want to get out. I think that in the medium term, it will increase demand. Just my sense.
Does anyone want to weigh in on real estate?
Oh, sure. Yes. So real estate, I believe, as in terms of the classification of industries, is an essential industry or essential business. So it can continue while this COVID-19 pandemic goes on. I mean, my sense is at the very least, there would be a flattening or decrease for a time period. And what that time period is, I'm not really sure. Simply because of the fact the economic ramifications from this whole thing are at this point bad but unknown, and I think there will be a lot less money around for people to be able to make the transactions. I have a daughter who's in London, England, a place with pretty expensive real estate, and coincidentally, just as this was starting, she had made an offer on a place in London, and then it was supposed to close just as things were starting. So they've stepped back from that because they expect the market to drop at least 10%, and they're sort of reevaluating things because they really don't know what's going to happen and don't want to go through with the purchase and find out they've lost 10% of the value immediately. So, but I think with time, our area was certainly remain as popular as ever. It's one of the most beautiful spots close to the 905 in Toronto that it is.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Where is a mandated share of responsibility between landlords, utilities, insurance companies, federal and provincial government? Just to further that, how is it that small business, which is closed, are solely responsible for all bills, then that there's no mandated shared responsibility so far? So it's a bit of a broad question, but Scott,
yeah, I can sort of start with the government piece. Certainly mandated responsibilities. I mean, there are specific mandated responsibilities of all levels of government in our Constitution, and despite that, of course, we're all working fairly well together. Some of those specific questions about rents and utilities and those kinds of things really are more provincial. But that said, I know that the Prime Minister has said today that he would be meeting with the premiers via one of these kind of calls tonight to talk about how the federal government might work with the provinces to assist with, among other things, commercial rents and those kinds of things. Because of course that's a huge issue, particularly in our area where people haven't really generated much revenue for the last few months. And so And I know that the Premier and Norm can speak to this, has announced that changes to hydro rates, so that when people are home, for example, using their hydro a lot more than they normally would, that time of use rate has been changed to the minimum. So, but it's specifically in terms of utilities and those kinds of things, I guess it really is more of a provincial and certainly a municipal matter for those people on municipal water and sewer.
Yeah, and that one move the province has taken is going to the lowest time of use pricing for all small businesses and families, knowing that they'd be at home most of the time and really have no choice on whether they were using electricity or not. And it's one of the many initiatives to try to lower costs. But I think we will also be looking to the federal government for, especially if this goes on, and there was a question about what happens if there's no season. And I certainly pose that to myself as if I was still in business. And I don't think there's too many businesses around that can survive a year with no revenue. And that's something that, for seasonal businesses like we have in Parry Sound Muskoka is a huge concern. So I think as this goes on, we'll certainly be looking for the minimum rent subsidies for commercial rents. And it sounds like the federal government is looking into that at this time and talking with the premiers.
Mayor Glover? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I had been posed the question yesterday with regards to the rent. So I'm glad you addressed it, both of you. Thanks, Norm and Scott. One of the issues with all the subsidies going on is that the smaller businesses, which I'm primarily hosting in Lake of Bays, they're falling through the cracks with a lot of these different programs. And I know I had a restaurant just outside of the city during SARS, and we didn't qualify for anything. So I hate to think that there's no way we can help these people with something, and certainly rent subsidies. And I don't know how you do that. Of course, rents are up and down, maybe a percentage or whatever you do, but that would certainly be appreciated and as I say, I was posed the question, so thanks for addressing it.
Yep, thanks. Also, sorry, on that point of restaurants you bring up, one of the moves the province made was to allow restaurants with bars to be able to sell liquor, unopened liquor, and as part of delivery, as a small way to try to generate some revenue for these restaurants that are really hurting.
I just add too that as much as there's small deferrals, the district water and sewer water and sewer invoicing has been deferred a couple of months, and they won't do any disconnects during this time frame. And so they're all very small things for businesses, but hopefully they all add up, and I think every day something new comes out.
Thank you. All right, understanding that the federal and provincial governments are working together economically, how is the district and municipality coordinating efforts to ensure business will survive and succeed in the future? Shall we start with you, Mayor Terziano?
Sure. I think right now the district and the municipalities, well, we did do the tax deferral penalty dates. We did do the water and sewer dates, as I just mentioned earlier. But right now we're working mostly with residents, probably more so than business, on food securities and rent subsidies and things like that. And I think that the way this has all rolled out, every level of government has dealt with the individuals first, and the businesses are just catching up now. So I expect that we will be focusing a lot of what we're doing on businesses and more in the recovery type phase is what we can do as two governments together.
Mayor Glover?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, there was a Zoom planning meeting yesterday where we were addressing housing and shelters and so on and so forth. So the district is working extremely well with all the towns and the townships. The townships weren't as involved before, but I'm very happy to say that the programming that's been set up is incredible. And I'm on one of the food security committees, as I said earlier, but there's also the housing side, the shelter side, and there's just enormous amount of support coming in from the governments to back those programs. And while I'm talking about it, the food security program is fantastic. I know that it was mentioned at one of the meetings that support has never been so great. So I'm very very happy moving forward so far with how we're covering that area. But the district is working very, very well all together on this. And as I mentioned earlier, the economic people are all working together, and so are all the outside programs working. So everybody's working together to resolve it best we can at this point.
Okay. The next question is, can we ask Ironman Canada to reschedule the race until later in the season or postpone until next year? There are too many people at risk for such a large, close contact event to take place in the early summer.
I think the short answer to that is the Ironman Canada is looking at a new date. It has not officially canceled their July 12th date, but they are looking at postponing until the end of the summer. Nothing definite yet, but yeah, that's definitely a concern, and it's something that's being worked on.
Okay. Has there been any thought put towards the impact of complete closure for summer camps? We employ 50 students and have campers from all over Ontario at our camp. I believe the recent announcement will help my seasonal staff, but what about the loss of complete revenue for the business? If we lose the summer, it will be like losing an entire year of revenue.
I guess I can start on that. I actually did a conference call with I think about 17 summer camps on a few days ago, and there's a huge amount of uncertainty right now. I mean, we're in April, and I know there post that call, it was expressed to me from a few of the camps that were saying don't close things down, don't make a decision to just not allow them to operate until we know for sure. But as I was saying earlier, most businesses cannot survive by losing an entire year's revenue. So I think if that does happen, government, senior levels of government are going to have to come up with something, or we're going to be losing an awful lot of businesses. But certainly there's a lot of uncertainty. Of course, you know, we have to win the health battle first, especially with children's camps. That's going to be the first concern, and kids are likely to be close together. I mean, I'm sure they can come up with protocols as well to make it safer, but the nature of camps is that kids are in a cabin on bunk beds and relatively close together. So that, you know, obviously would need this safety, depending on where we are in the health, would need to be addressed. But you know, it's certainly a very important issue to raise.
Mm-hmm. And of course, children's camps are such a huge economic driver in our area as well.
Yeah, we have a huge number of camps around, around the region.
Scott Aitchison?
Yeah, I was just going to add that this is one of the, it's a huge issue for our area, and it's as part of the Conservative Party, we have a number of sort of issue-based caucuses where Conservative MPs get together on these meetings and talk, and so one of those is a tourism caucus. So I'm the deputy shadow critic for tourism, which means not much of anything other than they acknowledge there's a lot of tourism in my area. That said, we've had a couple of meetings, and in those discussions, we've talked a lot about the challenges that tourism-based businesses are having in terms of accessing a lot of these programs, and I've obviously raised the issue of summer camps as well. And of course, when I raise these issues, there are other MPs from other parts of the country that have similar issues. So, you know, we're not alone in terms of these issues. The Prime Minister has spoken to the fact that there will be some very specific and targeted programs announced shortly for the tourism related industries. And we've encouraged them to include summer camps as part of that math. So.
And I guess I'll add again on that fairly a different business, but a similar problem is for seasonal campgrounds, which right now are not a central business. So they would face a similar problem if we don't start winning on the health front, where they could lose an entire season.
Yeah.
Okay. So this isn't a question per se, but certainly a hot topic, and I think warrants some discussion. I'm growing increasingly worried after watching the influx of the population rise on Easter weekend here in Huntsville. I understand that if you own a property here and pay taxes and give to the hospital here, that you indeed have a right to be here. It is when people are traveling back and forth from larger city centers, shopping in grocery stores, and bringing the family up here for a much needed break, but not respecting that they should be coming up to isolate and stay here in their cottages for weeks on end with supplies to last them as long as they plan on being here. We have to have a global mindset to physically distance ourselves. If we don't do this, our little community cannot handle the amount of food supplies needed to feed us all in hospital care that will sure to be exhausted. Shall we start with you, Scott Aitchison?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this. I guess the first thing I would say is that part of me understands why people want to get to the cottage to isolate there. They probably feel a lot safer there than they do in the city. I think it's important for us to remember that people who have cottages here are part of the community as well. They're residents as well. And I think it's important for them to make sure that they're following all the guidelines here that they would be encouraged to follow in Toronto. Now, the Premier has encouraged them to stay home. I know lots and lots of cottagers who have done that. They're not here at the cottage. They're actually at their homes. I think at the end of the day, we just need to make sure that we're respectful of each other and just make sure that we, respectfully and politely encourage people to follow the guidelines. I think where we run into real problems is when you have, a family, roll up the highway and then everybody gets out and goes into the grocery store together and just treat it like there's nothing going on. It's important for them to understand that, it's an issue here as it is in the city. If they can't stay home, they should, but if they're going to come up to the cottage, they should hide out there and literally self-isolate like all the rest of us are doing.
Norm?
Yeah, on this issue, when it first came out, I think it was when the mayor of Bracebridge was, I think there was a bit of a rush on the food stores, I think, and he reacted and more or less said people shouldn't be coming up. And initially, my response was it should be based on health and what's best for fighting the health aspect of the COVID-19 pandemic. And shortly thereafter, I think the Chief Medical Officer of Health in Ontario and nationally advised people to stay home. And certainly that has been the message from the Premier on many occasions. And, I've done responses encouraging that as well. As Scott said, I do certainly understand that some people might feel safer at their cottage. Before the advice from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, we live just north of Parry Sound on Georgian Bay, and our neighbors are seasonal residents, and they're in their 70s, and I won't name them, but they have some compromised health as well. And before all these announcements were made, I noticed they were up. It was early March, and they're still up. But frankly, they've hardly left their home, and I think maybe they shop once for groceries, and I can't blame them if they feel safer doing that. And I think they've been quite respectful in the way they do this. They've done it. But I also think it's important that the seasonal residents are a very important part of our community, and I hate to see an us versus them sort of attitude. I think we all have to live together, and we will be, as we always have been, dependent on seasonal residents for local taxes and support of our hospitals and et cetera, and big supporters of our businesses. So I think it's important we be respectful and get along.
Mayor Terziano?
Yeah, Norm's absolutely right. We don't want to create an us versus them in any respect, and we rely on our seasonal residents to be part of our community all summer, over the holidays. When COVID broke out, as a community, we're not prepared for the influx of our seasonal residents, because we do things different in the summer because we're expecting our population to double and triple. So it was a little bit scary. There was a run on groceries in the food stores and people started to panic a bit. But the truth of the matter is that that's over, and the grocery stores have filled their shelves, and the hospital has said that they are prepared to deal with who's here. But that said, we're taking our direction from the provincial government. And when the Premier says stay home, then I think that's one of his directions. So I would encourage people to stay home as much as possible. And people who are out and about here aren't always a seasonal resident. Sometimes they're permanent residents. So I just think that people should remain calm and try not to point the finger.
Thank you. Mayor Glover?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that was said. I think that, you know, if we can, if everybody looks out for themselves and treats everybody else with compassion and kindness and looks after their own health, you know, we're going to all get through this together. And it was said a number of times. I mean, there's all kinds of argument that we need the seasonals and the seasonals need us, and we all have to work together on this the best we can to get through it. There certainly is different, in the district you have different situations, but there certainly are people here from the city, and you know, in a few short weeks or months or however long this takes, we're sure going to be glad they're here then, because I know I've had retail in both Bracebridge and Huntsville, and I have retail now, and strongly dependent on seasonal spending dollars. It's extremely important to all of our towns. And on the other hand, you know, everybody's worried about their own safety, and so I'm feeling comfortable with the hospitals are saying, and I'm seeing it's quite good in the grocery stores now. There's the odd thing missing. I don't know why some of the things are not there that were there before, but who knows why some people are buying all the flour and whatever. But no, I agree that we all have to go through this together and work together on this one.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question. Regarding the 75% wage subsidy, many seasonal businesses are incurring wage costs in March and April as they prepare to open on or about May 1st. In March and April, they have no revenue as they are not yet open. Therefore, they cannot demonstrate a 30% reduction on sales revenue for these months and appear to be unable to access the wage subsidy for these 2 months, even though it is very likely that there will be a very significant revenue drop once they open in May or later. Has the Canadian government made any provisions for seasonal businesses facing this issue? Would a 30% drop in reservation deposits in March and April qualify them for wage subsidy in these 2 months?
Well, yeah, I can start there. The government has said that the 30% sales reduction will be measured over the course of the whole year. So that's one issue. It's not 30% drop from just these few months. That said, we have also, as I said before, when it comes to sort of tourism related businesses that are seasonal in nature, we continue to raise that issue with the government to suggest that we're going to need to have different kinds of supports and programs to assist those businesses. And one of the things that our party has been pushing for is a full refund of all GST collected for the last 12 months. Because this is the kind of thing that we think will actually get cash into business owners' pockets right now to help them defray the costs that they're dealing with right now, and a lot of their startup costs as they get rolling, you know, for the summer too. So that's one of the things that we've been pushing for as well. I would say to this question, if you have any other suggested things that we should be trying to push for, I want to hear those, because what I do is I share those with our critic for finance and for small business, and they share the ideas with the Minister of Finance and the Cabinet Committee making decisions. And by the way, I should say this. I mean, that process is actually working fairly well. All parties are working together. When we hear ideas and we share them, many of them have been adopted by the government to help out. So. It's not like normal days, so they're actually working together a bit better than usual.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about light commercial construction in Muskoka. There are a number of residential construction projects of a variety of size in Muskoka that are allowed to continue during the pandemic shutdown. There are a number of light commercial projects that are not much larger than typical residential projects, but have been told to shut down. Is it possible that the rules for essential construction in Ontario, or perhaps just Muskoka, could be modified to include light commercial projects with less than 10 people on a site at any given time. A number of these projects have timelines, such as being open for the summer tourist trade or being ready for the fall when students return to school. Those deadlines will be missed if we cannot resume work on these projects. The health risk on the smaller light commercial sites is the same as is on residential construction sites. We'll start with you, Mr. Miller.
Sure, and the question was, is there a possibility of relaxing the rules for smaller commercial construction sites? Yes, I absolutely believe there will be as we start to win the health battle. So that's why it's so important that we all continue to do everything to make sure we do win the health battle. But, you know, I've been talking to various businesses. I know I was in the tourism sector talking to a restaurant that when they couldn't operate, they decided to renovate. And they started renovating, and then with the central business list, they were shut down. So now they say, well, we need at least a month lead time to get our renovations done to be able to open. A resort that I was talking with decided to renovate their kitchen, and similar thing. They started the renovation, now that's shut down. And I'm sure there's lots of other cases of businesses like that. So I think, you know, I'm hoping that we're going to see a phased approach to reopening our economy that maintains safety. You know, so if for a golf course, that means you go out with one person on a golf cart, and every golf cart is sterilized every time you go out. Or for a marina, if it allows a marina to start delivering some boats and collecting the money from boats they've sold without making contact with people, or if it's for smaller construction projects that can work safely. I think those are also the sorts of things that I would want to see happening as we start to come out of this, and to get people working and get the economy going again.
Mayor Glover?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I did have a conversation recently with our building superintendent, and he was saying that prior to this, and even now, you know, they're just finishing up, but the contractors were very respectful. Of course, the building inspectors had their rules and regulations when they walked in, and looked into some pre-screening with people, but we certainly aren't the city of Toronto here, and so anything we can do, certainly, Norm, I'm sure you're working on it, but anything we can do to speed that along when it in fact is, you know, safe for us all and safe for our health, certainly that's priority one. But that would be much appreciated, and I believe that industry will pick right up again where it left off. I'm certainly hopeful for that.
Scott, so go ahead, Mayor Terziano.
Yeah, I think also, I know our building department is still working, and they're doing the inspections that they're allowed to do. They're following the guidelines of the province as to what inspections they can and can't do, which should be operating, but they are also continuing to review plans that are submitted and permits that are submitted, so that when we do get the green light to start again, the building permits will be ready for pickup, and people will be able to get going quickly.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is sort of directed to you, Scott. Are the employee paid EI and CPP contributions recoverable for employees being paid to work via CEWS as well as CEWS, as well as those employees being paid to be on leave? It seems that it may only be the latter right now.
Yeah, it depends on how you read it. It's a bit confusing, I agree. In some cases, it looks like you have to. In some cases, if you read it a different way, you might not have to. This actually is something that I wouldn't mind Kirsten coming back on to speak to as well. She's a little more experienced with it than I do. She's been dealing with.
Okay, just a second. Kirsten, where are you? Kirsten Baker. Kirsten is going to join us here shortly.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So I just want to clarify the question. Is it about the payroll deductions for EI that you're asking?
So I'll repeat the question. Are the employee paid EI and CPP contributions recoverable? Very specific for payroll, yeah.
I am not sure the answer to that question. but we can certainly find out. I don't think that they're recoverable. I think that right now the Conservative Party is trying to get GST back for everybody, but not the payroll deductions. But it's certainly something we can submit and find out.
Sure. Okay. We'll just add that to our list of things to look into. Thank you. Okay. The next question is, are all boat ramps closed? And if so, to whom? May homeowners launch their boats? And what boat activities are permitted or prohibited, for example, fishing? So let's start with just boat ramps being closed, and then and whether or not homeowners can launch their own boats.
Sure, I can start with that if you like.
Sure.
And it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of boat ramps. I'd say most are probably, a lot of them are municipal, and otherwise they're owned by marinas. So for example, where I live in McDougall Township, they decided to close them a few weeks back, and they barricaded them off. I think it's sort of 50-50. Some municipalities have decided to leave them open. I think Township of Muskoka Lakes, they're open with thought that they'd be needed for emergencies, for police, or for some construction companies that are still operating as well on residential construction. Township of Georgian Bay, I believe they're shut there. And for marinas basically can just launch boats for someone to access what is a permanent resident, or they could also launch emergency boats as well, but not for recreational fishing. Specifically, can you, if the municipal boat launch is open, could you launch your boat and go fishing? I would say I'm not aware of there being a rule against it. Again, a neighbor I have before McDougall barricaded the boat locks, launched their boat, and they've been going out, the father and son, very close by, not really going very far, but fishing nearby us for trout fishing. I would say it's not something that is to be encouraged, and if it was to be done, it should be done by people that are in a close family unit, not with anybody that, not with people that aren't living right together all the time. And it's certainly not something to be encouraged. We're trying to maintain social distancing, but there's not any specific rule against it. And I have certainly seen a few boats out fishing. There's also a rule about not having more than 5 people in one spot. And in a boat, I would, if you're going to have social distancing, I don't know how you'd have more than 2 people probably in a boat.
Okay.
We've had the discussion a couple of times in Huntsville, and our boat launches are currently open. We've had requests from commercial businesses and from I believe Bell Canada that they use our boat launches to get to areas they need to go to work. So right now they're open, and we will talk about it every week as we see whether things ramp up or not.
Thank you. Mayor Glover?
Yeah, just that our CAOs are all talking about this, and currently ours are open as well, but we do have a number of construction companies, and we're monitoring them for safety. And at that point, that's all I can say for now. That's where we're at. They are open.
Okay. So we'll follow up on that with you, Mr. Miller, in terms of, if there's anything potentially coming down the pipe with activities that would be prohibited going forward. Maybe we'll circle back to that in the next forum, just to see if that's coming, I don't know, as all of our ice is starting to come off the lakes. Okay, the next question, what government department, if any, actively regulates insurance companies to protect business consumers from price gouging and forced purchase of unnecessary coverage that is going on during this crisis? There's a bit of background. If a shuttered business only requires insurance to protect business assets from fire, theft, or fallen trees, they should not be forced to purchase millions of dollars in liability protections for operations that don't exist. While I've never made a claim, my insurer had $1 billion net profit. Why is the liability coverage I don't even need going up 30% during a pandemic? By any legal definition, this is price gouging at the very least. Who wants to tackle that?
I'll take a stab at first at it. So, I mean, obviously for auto insurance, that's regulated provincially, but for business insurance, it isn't regulated in the same fashion. On the liability issue, I would think for the way it is in Ontario these days, I think pretty much any business would want to have liability insurance. And if you borrow any money, your bank would probably require it as the province. And it's not something I like to see, but as you see the province becoming more and more litigious and more people suing other people for slip and fall and various things, and you see big billboards along the highway, if you fall down, you basically sue. And certainly my experience talking with businesses, that's becoming more and more common. In fact, I had a private member's bill to do with slip and fall to make some of the timelines tighter to lessen the number of slip and fall suits that go on. So I would just advise that I wouldn't think that any business would not want to have liability insurance in today's age. And generally business insurance is not as regulated as is something like automotive insurance, which is quite regulated.
Does anyone else want to talk about insurance?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, insurance is provincially regulated, so I guess that's appropriately answered by Norm.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Kirsten has just texted me to indicate that she has some more information on employer deductions. So Kirsten, I shall unmute you and you're on.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
So I looked for an answer on this. So the answer that we're receiving right now is because those payroll deductions go towards a future application like CPP pension or EI in the future, as long as the person is continuing to work, those payroll deductions need to continue and be sent to the federal government.
Okay. Thank you. The next question, can you please ensure domestic production of PPE and hand sanitizer is an immediate priority? And can you please ensure there will be adequate retail supplies of hand sanitizer and N95 masks before we attempt to reopen everything?
I can start if you want. I know certainly the Premier has been very strong on wanting to not be as dependent on foreign supplies for these critical things like masks and ventilators and other products that we absolutely rely on. And the province has been trying to and receiving lots of support from business. They have a website, Ontario Together, to get ideas from businesses and support from businesses that can do things. And we have distilleries and breweries like Muskoka Brewery making hand sanitizer, and Dillon's, Jeff Dillon, who grew up in Bracebridge, Dillon's distillery making hand sanitizer. And we have companies like Woodbridge, which has in the past has done automotive foam, has now an approved product for I think it's called an N96 to replace the N95. So big efforts are being put towards trying to get more homegrown products and ventilators. And of course, there was just recently approved by Health Canada, I believe it's called the Spartan testing device, of which the province has ordered 900,000 of these devices that were just certified by Health Canada and will allow for testing a positive test within about an hour. So as those come on stream, we should be able to see greatly expanded testing. I think today the testing in Ontario was about 9,000 cases, which is about the highest it's been, and we're actively trying to ramp up testing dramatically. Thanks.
I would just add, I mean, I completely agree with, the Premier's comments on that and trying to make sure that we're not caught off guard. Like if you look at Alberta, I mean, they were well stocked, right? They're sharing now product with other provinces, including Ontario. I know that the one of the hiccups in this process for businesses trying to retool to produce things like hand sanitizer has been the approval process at the federal level. So it's one of the areas where we've been able to help some local breweries, for example, get through that process and get working. So there's a few breweries now that have been finally approved and are actually producing as per Health Canada guidelines and getting that product out. So.
Okay, thank you. We're sort of circling back to a construction question, but it's a bit different. So there seems to be areas of confusion for a number of local trades. The construction season in Muskoka is extremely short, and local contractors are looking for clarity in whether or not their current projects can be restarted. Specifically, if a residential property was in mid-construction when the snow fell in December, are the contractors able to resume work once the snow leaves? This was posed by a number of hardscape landscapers wanting to complete new build residential landscaping, often as the homeowner needs certain pieces to be completed to proceed with finalizing construction loans. In all cases, the owner will ensure no more than 5 staff on site, social distancing, use of their own tools, as well as travel in individual vehicles. There seems to be a split in opinion. Some are starting back up to complete these projects, not new projects, and some are interpreting the rules differently. How should they proceed to get clarity?
I can start on that if you like.
Thank you.
So construction in the latest emergency order was deemed to be an essential business. And when that order was made, I specifically asked on a caucus call with regard to seasonal residents, which we probably wouldn't likely necessarily consider an essential business. But the response I got was no differentiation between residential. It's just residential. So even as seasonal residents would be deemed essential in terms of allowing construction if a company wishes to keep working. The government can't compel any company to keep working, but they are allowed if they so desire. Otherwise, the rules about what projects can continue under the emergency order is if there is a foundation poured, or if it was a renovation, if the renovation had started, I believe, by April 4th, then the project can continue. The part that's been shut down is commercial, all commercial construction. I think especially with in mind would be those commercial towers in Toronto where you'd have construction crews all riding up on an elevator together, and it'd be a lot harder to maintain social distancing. I've been getting a lot of calls and emails from the people in the landscaping business. And I happen to have a son in the landscaping business as well. And he sort of looked at it and decided not to operate at this time. But that's the sort of business that as we win the health battle, that I would think would be one that should be able to open relatively early, because you would be able to maintain social distancing and have you might have a crew of 2 landscapers. And probably the trickiest part would be whether they ride in the same truck to get to the job or not, but you should be able to do the work and maintain social distancing. So I think there is still some gray area though, because I suppose if you're building a new home is normally landscaped before the owner takes it over. So, you could say that having the landscaping done is part of that construction. So there is a bit of a gray area, and I certainly don't want to give legal advice, but so I would advise anybody who's not positively sure that to call the Stop the Spread 188 number, which is 1-888-444-3659. That's 888-3659 to get a response as to what the business is planning and doing, making sure that it is in fact allowed to do that.
And do either Mayor Glover or Mayor Terziano want to weigh in on that?
No, we've had a lot of calls too, and we basically refer them to the 888 number because there are so many gray areas that we don't want to weigh in on the legality of it either. And I've had calls through this from people who are actually working for construction companies who are concerned about their own well-being and don't want to be at work. So there's a lot of gray out there, and I think that we just keep referring them to the provincial government.
I would agree. I guess the real issue is this came on so fast. Decisions were made to keep people safe, and I did get a number of landscapers call as well, wondering, whether it's they're clearing winter kill and stuff from people's yards, and is it a safety issue if you trip on and that would be all they would do. They weren't as concerned with cutting the grass and so on going forward or doing the gardens. It was just kind of pathways from the driveway. I hear you, and it looks like we're all kind of in agreement there. It's just a matter of it getting better so they can get right back to it.
Yeah, it's a good question. All right, the next one is estimated U.S.-Canada border opening date. Oh, you're muted there, Scott.
Sorry, I actually, the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, spoke about that very issue today on her regular briefing, and she didn't really give an answer about when it would happen, but that it would be done in cooperation with the United States. Apparently, discussions about that border have gone very amiably, apparently, or so she says. So that's good news. But that they will base their decision on when to open it in consultation with the Americans, and also based on the best scientific evidence and best practices. So that's a politician's way of saying, I don't know.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I heard President Trump asked that question yesterday in his daily news conference, and my reaction as I was watching it was, I think it's going to be more a decision for Canada to make whether we want to open our border to the States too early, because obviously in terms of the health concerns, they're way, way, way worse in the States than they are in Canada. So I think that should be our consideration, is their act together before we start allowing folks from there to just cross over. Of course, the border is open for trade, so that we have our food and other essential goods that are going back and forth both ways across the border. But yeah, I think I'd want to see a huge improvement in the health outcomes in the United States before the border, if allowing Americans into Canada, is considered to be open.
Thank you. All right, we have about 15 more minutes, and I do have a few more questions. So this one is about the emergency response benefit. When dealing with CERB, do things like rental income and dividends from businesses count as income? I'll start with you, Scott.
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that again for me.
When dealing with the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, do things like rental income and dividends from businesses count as income?
Currently they don't. This is one of the issues that we've continued to raise with the government. They have expressed some openness to making changes to this wage subsidy program, because so many small businesses, they don't pay themselves a wage. They live off dividends, and so they have said that they're open to looking at it, and we continue to lobby for it. But as of right now, no, it doesn't qualify.
Okay, thank you. Another one for you, Scott, actually. What is happening with Canada Summer Jobs Program? We should have heard by now.
Well, so the government, with much fanfare, actually announced that they were extending the time period that people will be allowed to work and all that kind of stuff. And so more people can apply and all that good stuff. The problem, of course, is they haven't added any more money to the program. So there were already more applications than there was enough money for. I think that our riding gets about $700,000 towards this program. And so what they do is they give my office an opportunity to review the recommendations of who to get money. And my staff and I are reviewing it right now, frankly, to take a closer look at it, to see if there's things that we can do with the list to try to spread it out to cover more people. Mm-hmm. So in right now, for example, some public agencies, so like a municipality might have applied for a whole bunch of different positions, and they might have got approved for all of whereas some little struggling small business applied for something and they didn't meet enough points or something and they didn't get covered. So I think what I'm going to try to do with that program is to spread out the money a little bit more and cover more more businesses and more not-for-profit agencies as well as so like the town of Huntsville might not get every single one they've applied for as an example, but that way we can spread it out a little bit more. Sorry, Mayor Terziano, but
Do we usually get it?
I think so.
It's happened. It changes every year.
Yeah, but that is the issue. I want to make that very clear. They've opened up applications, but they haven't added any more money to the program as of right now. If they do add more money, then that obviously that makes it more viable, I guess, to include more people. But that's the challenge we have right now with that program.
Thank you. Do you have any additional information on the Prime Minister's announcement towards commercial rent subsidy or assistance?
No, I don't right now. This is a kind of an overlap into provincial responsibility. So the Prime Minister did say today that he would be discussing this issue with all the premiers this evening on their, I guess, regular call. And the idea being that the federal government would assist provinces to help make this program a reality, along with a couple other things that they've been looking at. So he still has to have that conversation, and then we should, know more after that. So I applaud the idea. I think that it's going to be a particularly helpful tool in our area, and for a lot of the really truly small businesses. Like I'm thinking about our main streets all over Parry Sound, Muskoka. These are small little shops that the bills keep coming in and they're not generating any revenue, and they need to get ready for the summer. So I think it's something we desperately need, and he has to have that conversation, I think, with the premier. So.
Thank you.
I agree with Scott.
Okay. All right, the next question. Can you please mandate the public not to recreate, go for a walk or whatever, more than 2 kilometers from their residence? Too many people are looking for loopholes. There have already been too many people driving, parking, and congregating at Dwight Beach in particular. Within 2 kilometers, you can still jog or ride a bike. Thoughts on that? Shall we start perhaps with Mr. Miller?
I was going to say the mayor of Lake of Bays might want to start with that one.
No, you go ahead, Norm.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I think, firstly, I don't know how that could even happen, that you could figure out how far everybody is from everywhere. And certainly everybody's looking for loopholes, ways to get around the fine wording that the province has put forward. And we're just trying to follow all the rules. They're provincially mandated rules. We're directing people to, of course, the phone number with the OPP, to the dispatch number, if they've got concerns with regards to all those different things. And so I just really hope people can, just kind of take it easy. We're all in this together. Let's be gracious and work together on this and get through it. I mean, it's certainly been said that people are supposed to get exercise, and you want them to get. I mean, I've been walking more than I've ever walked. I don't even have a dog, and I got to say that everybody's out walking, and walking's good. It helps relieve some of the stress you're under. You get some fresh air, and the bugs aren't out yet. That's a good thing. Just let's be kind to each other, and everybody kind of, if everyone looks after themselves and looks after their health first, we're going to get through this together. And that's all I can say to that. I mean, roads are roads. We can't block roads. Parking is parking. So I do know the OPP are out looking at these things too. So now it's Norm's turn.
Okay, sure. So, I mean, I think the premier in his daily press conference has been clear that he prefers not turning Ontario into a police state and would rather appeal to the good behavior of all the residents. And I think generally people are doing a pretty good job and it's important we keep doing that. I would agree that it's good to get out for a walk, and we live in an area that does have a lot of space. So If you do it in a way that's considerate, you should quite easily be able to maintain social distancing and from your neighbor or whoever else happens to be out on the country road or where you're going for a walk. So I think we need to be cognizant of that, but I would agree it's probably a good thing to get out and on a regular basis and get some exercise. And I do believe that in the public, it's looking like we're starting to win, and we have to keep maintaining that so that we can start to ease the restrictions that we're all facing and get back to normal.
I get out for a walk every single day, an hour to 2 hours, and I have 3 or 4 different routes because I actually get bored with the same scenery. And I have to tell you, I have not seen anybody abusing the rules on my walks. I pass people all the time. We cross the road, pass somebody else. People are being great out there. So you know what? There are some real positives.
Yeah.
And people do need to get out and get some fresh air and get some exercise.
Absolutely. All right. What is happening in regards to fines for those not following the rules of operation, in brackets, a non-essential business still operating?
That's a good question. I don't know what the actual fines are. I believe they are relatively substantial, but I don't know what they are exactly. So I would need to I need to check on that. I know that I did a call with in different marinas a couple days ago, and some of them mentioned that the OPB had visited them and talked to them about how they were doing their operations, what they were doing. And I believe there are substantial fines. I just don't know off the top of my head what those fines are.
We'll circle back to that one too. Will the temporary foreign worker program happen this year? And what will happen with bringing large number of people from foreign countries? My agricultural business depends on this program. Scott, do you want to?
Yeah, I can start there. We have been told that it will, and I'm going to actually ask Kirsten once again to come on. There was a question on the Q&A here about that, and I honestly I don't know all. I'm still new as an MP, so I didn't understand all the
no problem.
the logos, the LMIA. I didn't know what that was. So
okay.
Kirsten is a pro. She used to work for Tony, so she unfortunately has to jump in on this one as well.
You're lucky to have her.
I sure am.
Scott, I believe that if a worker comes in, they have to go into the quarantine for 2 weeks before they can start work.
Yeah.
Okay.
They definitely do. They definitely have to do that for sure. But I know that the government said that it will be open, and I just want Kirsten to speak a little bit more detail about it.
Yeah, so I can. We are being told that temporary foreign worker program is going ahead this year, but only for those in North America. So you can only hire temporary foreign workers from either the US or from Mexico. They are required to have the 2-week quarantine. So the employer has to provide housing for them to be able to do that. And there is additional permits that are going to be required at border cross. We keep on being told that it's going ahead and the temporary foreign worker permits have been issued, but I had a plane with a bunch of them on it in Mexico, and they were all removed from the plane for Canadians to get home. So it's a fine balance right now of trying to get our food supply and the agricultural businesses to continue to go ahead. And have these workers come in.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. All right, we unfortunately did not manage to get through all of the questions and answers, or questions, pardon me, but I know that we'll host another one of these soon. We're getting close to 3:30. I wanted to add for today, just in case this panel had some suggestions, but while there's been lots of questions posed, are there ideas that haven't been discussed today? And for those of our audience who are listening, I know that the panel is really keen on hearing ideas, suggestions, And I know that there's a number of people in the community who want to be part of solving some of the problems and being part of the solution. So I certainly would encourage anyone who's listening today to forward that to me. If your question didn't get it asked today, we'll definitely ask it the next time. We would love your ideas. I'll also just let you know there are 4 other sessions scheduled. Perry Sound, Carling, McDougall, and Seguin Township is Monday, April 20th at 6:30 p.m. Bracebridge and Muskoka Lakes is Tuesday, April 21st at 10:30 a.m. Gravenhurst and Georgian Bay is Thursday, April 23rd at 10 a.m. And Berks Falls, South River, and Sunridge will be Thursday, April 23rd at 6:30 p.m. And anyone who's on this webinar is welcome to attend any of these or all of these. If you have other questions, you can direct them directly to any of the offices. Scott Aitchison's is scott.aitchison@parle.gc.ca. If you send them to me, actually, because everyone has my email address, I will certainly forward them to the appropriate person, and I'll also share all of their emails with you going forward.
By the way, I've just shared my email address to the all panelists and all attendees. It's there, so if you want to cut and paste it.
Okay.
Any questions we didn't get to here, or any ideas you have that we can be lobbying the government for, I want to hear them. And so whatever you can send to us, please do, and we will do a follow-up for sure.
And further to that, as Scott indicated, a number of these initiatives are going to take all levels of government, and that's where we can come in to support working together, pulling these types of events together as well. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists truly for taking your time. And I hope that we'll have some new ideas that will emerge from this together that we'll share at our next forum, which I hope to be in the next couple of weeks. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add, Mayor Terziano?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Again, thank you very much for organizing this, to you and to Scott. And I just wanted to say my technical abilities, I just put my email address there instead of my name, if you can see that. So if you have any questions or want to get any information to us at the town of Huntsville, please email mayor@huntsville.ca. Nice, easy one to remember.
Yeah. Mayor Glover?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, thank everyone, and certainly, Norm, if you could pass along our thanks to the Premier and Scott, to your seniors. And I wanted to say that for the small businesses in Lake of Bays, I think it's really important that first off, you make sure that you've done everything you can to help yourself financially, and check with your banks, check with our economic development coordinator. She wants to work with you, work through all the programs. They're all listed on the websites. They're listed on the district website, our website. And trust your instincts for your business moving forward, and take advantage of this time if you can to read. I know I've had small businesses since I was very young, and you never get a break to read and study, because there's lots of innovative ideas out there right now, lots of really interesting concepts being developed to deal with this in the future. So if I could just recommend those things for now, and certainly reach out to me, tglover@lakeofbays.on.ca, and Kelly would have all our information, I'm sure, and I'd pass it along. But thank you very much to the businesses for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Glover.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, and thanks, Scott, for organizing, and Kirsten as well, and doing a lot of work in the background, and for all the great participation today. Appreciate it.
All right, well, we'll wrap up today. This session has also been recorded and will be posted on the Chamber's website. I certainly believe Scott Aitchison's website will be sharing it all over the place. Media, I know, is on the webinar as well, but contact me if you have any questions anytime. And thanks everyone for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.